All right. Well, we've got a wonderful panel here. Thank you all for being here. Today we are talking about how founders can build on foundation models. And we have a very diverse kind of set of companies up here. We got Google, we got 12 Labs, we got Amazon, and you guys all do a lot of different kinds of models. I want to just to start, talk about the ways that you're seeing AI models progress and get better. And you could talk about what you've seen in your own companies, kind of the evidence of that, and also just the methods that you're using to really push the state of the art. Let's start here and go down.
Yeah. Well, first of all, thanks for hosting this panel, Max. Excited about it. I think there's the cool thing about this AI moment right now is like there are many scaling paradigms. So I think like reasoning has been the hottest one. Like it's clear you can scale up reasoning. It's like super data efficient to do that. I think pre-training, despite all of the rhetoric about pre-training doesn't work, I think like at least for us, like if you look at the 2.5 Pro, Gemini 2.5 Pro story, like its innovation across the pre-training stack is a large part of what enabled that. And obviously, like post-training data stuff is still scaling well. So it is cool to see. I think the narrative like 6-8 months ago now was like AI's hitting a wall. I don't think that that's true across any of the dimensions which we've historically scaled on, which is super exciting from like if you're somebody who is excited about model quality improvement. So it's been awesome to see.
All right.
Great. Well, thanks for having me. Hi, everyone. Jay from 12 Labs. I think in terms of model improvements, like some of the benchmarks that's well known and what we care about, I think like it's mesmerizing to see how we can improve so quickly. But I think often cases now, I think we care more about some of the last mile capabilities that can kind of put everything together. Those are still, I think the industry is like trying to move fast, but still we're struggling a bit more because there's no known evaluation data set for it. And I think it's also unique to different companies. So at least for 12 Labs, building kind of like a full stack video understanding infrastructure, which involves proprietary models, we try to spend a lot more time on building data sets that actually matter to our customers. That is also probably the fastest way for you to guide your models to solve use cases, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Danielle?
Yeah. So we think a lot about the foundation models having more and more multimodal capabilities, but one of the things that we're really focused on is the range of multimodal capabilities. So it's not just text and images and video, but what kind of images. And in our lab, we're thinking a lot about the images that you see on computer screens, so UIs, all like screenshots even. That is really underrepresented in a lot of the models, and we're training our models to be able to understand those interfaces, the UIs, just like we do, which gives categorically new capabilities to the models. We're really thinking about how to give these models kind of an early form of embodiment so that they understand the computers like we do.
Got it. And one thing I really wanted to hit on, and we talked about this a bit before, was just kind of the areas that startups should not build on, because these are the areas where you, as the AI model provider, are going to develop this capability yourselves. You're going to develop the products around it. We've seen this happen a lot in the industry where, in the early days of ChatGPT, people came up with like PDF readers. And then, what do you know? You use ChatGPT today, it can totally read PDFs. You don't need to add anything to that. We were just talking earlier on stage about Windsurf, an AI startup that's was largely powered by Anthropic's models, and the other day Anthropic said, we're not going to give you direct access to those models anymore. So where should startups not build? Where are the areas that you are going to build and they should stay out of your way?
I think I can take this one to start off. First, I think founders should build what they want to build, to be honest, regardless of market dynamics. If you truly believe in it, I think it's always good to give it a go. But I think just blatantly maybe building like a general purpose foundation models, we've probably gone past that phase a little bit. But I think modality specific or even like industry specific foundation models could be very interesting. But if you're not like a model builder, I would think about how do we how do you make sure? So I think like usage is something that we talk about a lot, but there's smart usage and there's dumb usage, right? I think there's the way I define dumb usage is maybe you're wrapping things around and there's no, value capturing net that you've provided within your product, and it's basically, coming, like the request is coming in and it's going straight to some other model provider. I would say that's probably like dumb usage. But in terms of just building, I think I would first like position my company in a way that fully leverages all of the improvements that's happening within the foundation model ecosystem. And I think like one of the companies that did really well is like Perplexity did a great job, right? Where they can fully leverage all of the improvements that's happening on the model side of things. And secondly, I think lacing in some physical components into your business could be interesting, right? I think in terms of like digital world, these models are incredibly capable, but I think there's still that gap between translating or connecting digital to physical. So I think there's that inherent barrier that founder grit and just grinding can provide a lot of value.
Interesting.
I've got a quick take on this, which is I think there's never been a better time in human history than right now to go and build startups. I think it is this AI moment, startups have such an entrenched advantage because of the velocity of being able to build products. And you're also like starting from scratch. You have a clean slate, you're a green field. You can benefit in a lot of ways from just like the frontier of the product infrastructure, like all the AI coding tools that you mentioned. There's like all the AI meeting and note taking. There's like in the entire world and stack of doing your job has become AI enabled. And I think if you're at a startup, you basically get to accrue all of that value. Like right out of the gate, which is really, really cool. So I think I think to the point of should you go build foundation models, I think like if you can raise enough capital, you can go build foundation models. But I think that's the question is like, do you actually have a differentiated edge doing that? And there's so many, like even the PDF use case I think is interesting because I bet there's ways like even if ChatGPT can read PDFs, like it doesn't mean you can't build a great business. And there's actually some startups that I've chatted with that are doing that because you can like go really deep in the PDF stack and like actually the problems people have with PDFs are kind of varied. If you have a really basic use case, you can just use one of the AI tools off the shelf. But if you really want to like solve for that user persona, like ChatGPT is probably not doing that. They're solving for like the 50th percentile user, and like actually businesses that are doing stuff with PDFs have a lot of really bespoke needs. So I think there's interesting stuff everywhere.
Yeah. I agree with both. I would say that you probably don't want to just fine-tune a model because as the models get better, they might do even better out of the box. But if you really think about the product shape, so not just chatbots, but new ways of interacting, not only can you have specific niches where you're really meeting pain points that customers have, but you can also elicit new types of interactions from customers and start to create new types of data, new categories of data sets, and that then becomes your moat. So I'd really encourage founders to think about product shapes that are significantly different than what our current mental model is. Start to think about agents and the types of things that you can do with these new agentic capabilities. That's something that we're focusing a lot on. And we're building on these small units of reliability that allows founders to do so much more in the agentic space than they could right now. So yeah, I think we're gonna see a flood of startups in this new agentic space.
Yeah, Danielle, you mentioned agents, and just to kind of like click into what Amazon's doing a little more, like you guys, are really kind of trying to like push agents with the Nova Act models that you've put out there, and I'd love to kind of hear your take for how developers can really utilize these to build maybe better, more custom agents. I think that's a question on everyone's mind today.
First, let me distinguish between, I think, what a lot of people think agents are and then what we're building.
Sure.
So a lot of people have this idea that agents are LLM wrappers, and yes, they can use some tools, and maybe they're getting really good at coding, which is true, but that's very different than agents that can use computers, what we call computer use agents, because they see pixels, they understand UIs like we do. And like I said earlier, they have a kind of early form of embodiment, so we've got this shared common ground with them. The thing that we're doing differently and that we believe really allows founders, developers, builders to have a new kind of access to these is by focusing on the smallest units of interaction. So if you're trying to play around with some of these other computer use models, you might notice, oh, I've got this high-level goal, but the model can't reliably break it down into the individual steps it needs and then reason through to execute that goal. It's, 40 to 60% reliability, and that's just not enough. So we are really trying to solve that problem by combining the advantages of the probabilistic, generative AI with more deterministic scaffolding. So we're integrating the ability to, reliably click and scroll and type with Python integrations.
And just for one more moment, and I want to hear about your kind of agentic efforts as well, but I feel like we've been hearing about this for so long, and then, specifically with the agents that can use, a browser for you, it still feels to me like they're quite limited in a way. And I'd love to hear what you're seeing inside the lab, what developers should expect is coming a year from now, 2 years from now on the agent front. How long do you think the tasks that, you would be able to automate, for example, would be?
Yeah, so I think another sort of correction to our mental model of agents is that these frontier labs are just going to build them and release them, and then you can use them. The community of builders are going to co-create these capabilities. So yes, we're starting with these really small units, but as people, as developers, are starting to imagine, okay, we want to automate this thing in my life and save X amount of minutes every day, or build something that saves other people X amount of minutes every day, that we better understand the types of things that are useful, and so then we can really tailor the improvements in model capabilities to those things. And that could go in all different directions depending upon how people start to find utilities. We're really focused not on just agents in a vacuum, but what do people find most useful, and that's going to be a function of all the different product shapes.
Yeah. Logan, what are you seeing at DeepMind and agents?
It's such a tough question. You're going to make me cough. The thing that's getting me most excited, and I think the reasoning frontier has been so fascinating to see play out, because we're seeing we're seeing the tool and the agentic bits actually move into the model reasoning process, which is really interesting. If you historically look at what would happen as, you ask the model to do something, it would then go and take a turn, and then the model sort of ends before an action actually happens. And I think with tool use plus reasoning, you see all of the tool stuff potentially move into the actual model reasoning process as it's trying to solve some problem. And right now, I think that's search, code execution. You can do bespoke custom function calling. But I think over time, this moment has kind of made me reframe my thought a little bit as far as where the scaffolding needs to be, where it doesn't need to be. And my worldview at the moment is that some of the shift we're going to see is the models just become agents themselves. Out of the box, Gemini looks like an agent because you flip a couple of switches and then all of a sudden it's doing all the things that would normally make it look like an agent. I think we're seeing that shift because the model capability is getting so much better. I think historically you had to build a bunch of this scaffolding because the models really couldn't, they weren't trained to do any of those long running tasks themselves. So I think that's in the next 12 months, I think we're getting more closer to a world where the models just do this out of the box, which I think is actually good for developers. You just don't have to, there's not as much scaffolding debt and you have to build a bunch of infrastructure to do it. It just kind of works.
Yeah. And Jay, I would love to hear from all of you, but starting with Jay, just the kind of startups that you've seen building with your models that you feel are really getting the most out of what you're offering. Who is kind of building something that you're yes, you guys understand why what we're building is different from what Google builds, was different from what OpenAI builds. This is uniquely a 12 Labs kind of developer.
Yeah. So For 12 Labs, and I would love to share how we think about this whole agent evolution. So what 12 Labs does is we are a full stack research and product company providing video understanding infrastructure for enterprises and developers. So most of our customers are video-centric businesses, and I think especially, so we serve a lot of customers from media, entertainment, sports, advertising, and now federal. What we see on the startup land, I think smart founders that are building video-centric businesses are also understanding the trend at which we're building this technology, right? As in, I think we had a kind of like a singular transformer model, right? And then mixture of experts came in, right? This whole concept of like ensembling is kind of like coming back, right? So what we think is like, okay, even though this model is not agents, it's compound system of models. And I think, for agents too, I think it's going to be compound system of agents, right? And I think in terms of like how we are positioning ourselves is, okay, we have historically been good and focused on video retrieval, search, temporal understanding, and dynamic metadata generation. So we'll try to, what does it mean for 12 Labs to then be kind of serve as like a visual cortex component for this agentic workflow? So we try to build a lot of experiences towards that, right? I think a lot of general purpose models are going to be incredibly good at like computer use, and hopefully we'll be able to leverage some of Amazon's agent ecosystem to be able to like build something compelling. But like our belief is that there could be like modality specific agent where we can kind of like outsource some of the understanding tasks that's specific to deep video understanding. But founders, I think like the first gen founders that built with 12 Labs was kind of like just wrapping, right? Maybe builds, a similar product leveraging our models and serve search, for example. Now we see domains like neo advertisement generation platforms that's indexing tens of millions of video assets, and they are super thoughtful about, again, product shape, where they're capturing their value and they know exactly how 12 Labs is playing its role and just fully leverage it, and also just call us all the time to shape our model because they know that they can help us do that. So yeah.
Yeah. And Danielle, kind of same question to you. Like, what are the startups that are really kind of building well with, Amazon's models today?
Yeah, so we released what we consider to be a research preview, so it's still very early, but we're already seeing some really exciting things, even internally. So Amazon has, so many different diverse use cases, and all of these teams are finding out how to make their work more efficient. And it's even things like, we fill out forms for X percentage of our day, and being able to take advantage of these small building blocks that we are working on making reliable, and that saves a ton of time. So it's these, again, starting with these small units of things, and now we're starting to see enterprises who have very similar use cases be like, oh wow, we could save billions each year by solving what seems to be a small problem, but that's going to be the entry point into then linking that with other small units that eventually you have whole workflows that are sort of solved reliably.
Yeah. And Logan, same question to you.
I think this question used to be harder because we didn't have the #1 model across many, many categories, but I think it's become easier. I think now there's people building across everything. I think and we were talking before we came on stage about just all of the progress in the coding product space. I think there's huge amount of Gemini adoption across those categories. I think like all the top coding tools right now are supporting Gemini 2.5 Pro, and we just actually launched earlier today a new variant of our 2.5 Pro model, which makes even more progress on coding, which is awesome. So it's been fun to see that. I think historically the answer had been multimodal. Like I think we had, because of the bet early on and from day one, Gemini was a large multimodal model, so it was great at image understanding and video understanding and audio understanding. I think now it's sort of the use cases have expanded super broadly, but I think the other thread of this has just been around like the cost Pareto frontier, which I think like has continued to move. and it keeps getting me excited for people who are building, because I think the world is still finding out about AI, and like I talk a lot about these, like all these different intersecting curves. There's like the cost of AI is going down, intelligence is going up and to the right, consumer knowledge and understanding of AI is going up and to the right, and therefore consumer willingness to pay for AI products and tools is going up and to the right. So it's this like beautiful mix of economics from a founder perspective if you want to build tools. So there's lots of interesting things to explore there.
There are, and at the same time, the thing I hear all the time from these companies that are building AI tools is that, you know, even the ones that are making revenue are not necessarily making a profit yet. So at what point do you think that these startups that are, like even the best ones, like Cursor or something, will like start turning a profit on these things? Like, because models have to get cheaper. Like that's the limiting factor here, right?
I think there's a lot of companies that are making a profit today. I think this, like, there's definitely ones that aren't, I'm sure. I think there's an interesting like psychological angle to this, which is like 2 years ago, OpenAI randomly set the price of ChatGPT at $20 a month, and then now every founder is like, well, I have to make my product $20 a month, and that maybe means I have to build a bad product, or I have to build a product that loses us $100 per user, or something like that. So I think there's a lot of like interesting stuff to explore. Is like, can you go up market? Can you like build for a different sort of a slightly different segment that like actually means you can build a sustainable business? And I think there's users in all of those categories. I think it's just a question of like, does the product positioning still make sense? But I think about this a lot as far as like, what can we do to help developers? And I think the thing we can do is like continue to drive the Pareto frontier of cost and intelligence.
Right. I mean, you guys just launched like a $250 Gemini subscription, so that's one way. Is just make it $230 more expensive. I mean, that'll help.
Well, and this is an interesting example where like I think there's the $250 subscription that we have has lots of stuff baked into it.
Sure.
I think it's also like not, that's an example where like it doesn't actually augment, like it's not like a work product. I think there's a lot of like really interesting like work related products where like, and software engineering is a great example of this. Like the economic value of like a software engineering task is like much higher than whatever the $20 a month you're paying for insert your favorite developer tool. So I think there is like a arbitrage that's happening as far as the amount of value that's being created versus like what people actually pay for these products today.
Yeah, I'm curious for the whole panel. I'd just love to talk about like, you know, if you think that, you know, you're seeing startups building kind of, you know, consumer tools with these models that like consumer price point that really like are able to, you know, be close to a profit, or do you really feel like, you know, where the models are at today, like it's really segmented to the like enterprise or like these more expensive subscriptions? Like I'd just love to hear kind of on the, you know, that front.
I think what we're seeing right now is not stabilized, and there are so many variables that go into the cost, and even the mental models we have of what is worth paying for, it's evolving in real time. So I think it's just really too early to sort of predict how it will all shake out.
Yeah. Totally, I agree. But some of the best companies that build with 12 Labs, they're really smart about staying very close to their customers' revenue generation land. So you know, they can definitely upsell their product that's leveraging our models and maybe Google's model, right? It's effectively a multimodal platform for specific vertical and use cases that's, you know, closely tied to revenue for their customers, right? For those, I think they're already, you know, profitable. Like we see companies that are doing amazing and they're 15 people team, basically, right? And I do agree with you too on how early things are, right? If you think about it, it's only been like 3-4 years, right? And you know, the initial version of GPT-2, 3 models, like we've come a long way, but still, like we're still in the very early innings. And I think now what we're seeing that's interesting is these model providers, effectively infrastructure, right, intelligence infrastructure, are now also building compelling applications on top of their own infrastructure, which is very interesting to see because not only they can like fully optimize the experience, but also the cost, right? So I think, you know, I think we're going to see a ton of companies similar. I think like 12 Labs is also kind of evolving in a way that we're playing more and more role on the end content generation as well. So it's super interesting to see.
Well, this is the thing I'm interested in, and I'm glad you brought that up, is because I do see a lot of these AI labs focusing more on products these days, and obviously you guys are tasked with working with developers, but I mean I think where do you kind of see like the long-term trajectory of like 10 years from now? Do you think like the developer kind of aspect is a bigger part of Google's business? Do you think that's like a bigger part of Amazon's business, or do you really feel like just across the industry these AI labs are really just they feel like they're all focusing on products now?
Well, we're focusing on developers right now because we have to meet the models where they are, and they need developers to be able to explore how they can get the most out of the models and create products. But I think that this is sort of, we'll never not focus on developers, but we will be able to sort of open up our consumers to less technical people. And the early stages right now are sort of ways of stabilizing our understanding what is valuable and also feeding back into this understanding of where we should focus the improvements of the models themselves and also the products. So it's kind of like a necessary starting point, but then we imagine that like everybody will be able to use these things and will be bounded only by their imaginations for what they can get out of the models and the products.
Yeah, I think that's 100% true. I think the interesting future is like this like personal software future where like everything that you're interacting with is like custom built for you. It's like one of one customer for a lot of this stuff. And everyone looks like a developer. Like at the end of the day, everyone's a builder because the tools and we're actually like a lot closer to that world, I think, than folks imagine. Like the bolts and the lovables, I think have proved this to be true. Like the core users of that are like not developers. It's less technical people. So I think we're going to get rapidly close to that world. And at the end of the day, like those people are going to need models and APIs and all that stuff to go and build. I think there's like an interesting question of like where the data layer and like the memory personalization layer comes in, which I think there's lots of interesting products and developer stuff happening in that space right now. But 10 years out is also very far from now, so we'll see.
I'm going to ask you guys a hard question next, and I've just been seeing, you work for Amazon AGI Lab. I mean, DeepMind is, your CEO is very focused on building AGI. I know you have very strong opinions about AGI too, Jay, and I'm just curious, like, if, we do reach AGI in 5 to 10 years or something, what is the point of serving a model through an API? I mean, why would startups, what are the tools that are left to build if you kind of reach these goals that your company's executives have set out?
I think what the world looks like from a developer perspective if we have AGI is like an API is a way in which you task AGI to go and do something for you. Like, so I actually think it's like the fundamental constructs I don't think are going to change. Like, I think if you look at how people use LLMs today, the questions that they ask are pretty a rough approximation of the questions people are going to be asking in 10 years. Like, go do this thing for me. Sometimes it doesn't work right now because the models aren't good or the infrastructure is not good or like the scaffolding is kind of not set up in the right way. But I don't think fundamentally things are going to look that different, which will be interesting to see play out.
Yeah, I think developers will definitely, I think, interact less with API. Maybe the whole concept of API gets abstracted away a little bit with AGI. But I also think we all are going to have like different definitions and perception of AGI. I think it really depends on a guy that's a white collar worker working on financial documents all day long would have very different view of AGI than I don't know, a plumber, for example. But I think what will matter is just getting things done, because I think like the core of like human innovation is like it comes from laziness, and we want agency, and we want not only just understanding but also getting things done. So yeah, that's how I view things a little bit. Yeah.
It's kind of funny because AGI is in the title of our lab, but we actually don't think that there's consensus on what it means, or it actually doesn't mean anything stable. It's just some concept benchmarked to human intelligence. And so we, instead of focusing on artificial general intelligence, we focus on what we call useful general intelligence, which is how can we use these models to make humans smarter and use agents to give humans more agency. And we're thinking of a future where, again, like we were saying earlier, everybody's using this new kind of intelligence and we're co-evolving with it. And yes, of course, work is going to look fundamentally different. Humans have gone through these shifts, many times, but the thing that we're targeting is not AGI in a silo. It's humans unlocking our potential because we're all interacting not only with the models, but with each other in fundamentally new ways. And we can transmit sort of concepts in our minds to each other in more effective, efficient ways.
All right. Well, I think that's our time. But Danielle, Jay, Logan, thank you so much. This was great.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
All right.